Moving to Virginia was a bit of an ordeal. If you watch my video on how bad moving to Oklahoma was, you know that I have a bit of an odd track record with moving to different states, something I've survived but have never quite enjoyed or had a positive experience with. I've had to live in some weird places. But after I got out of that trailer that I was living in where it was just hot all the time. I had, no air conditioning. I was just laying around depressed with no proper internet connection. My mom and my dad at this time had also been constantly fighting one another. All the time they were fighting. And it led to an argument that got so big that on my sister's birthday, actually, smack dab in the middle of August, my mom had decided to just take us to the McDonald's to quote unquote get ice cream in the morning. What she was really doing was talking with this woman who would get us out of the trailer and take us to this other, pay us for bus tickets to get us to another state and to just leave because there were domestic arguments that were occurring between my mother and my father. And it was a pretty fucked up thing to do to my sister on her birthday. Like, take her out on her birthday, give her that traumatic experience. That's fucked up. That was really fucked up. But we ended up leaving, and we went to Virginia after that, There was all those arguments have subsided. They were separated at that point, and both of us lived in this shelter for women, essentially, of like women who had left their husbands or women who had been in some way abused by their husbands verbally or physically, women who were just homeless and needed a place to go. It was kind of a catch-all place, and of course kids stayed there as well. It was this big house with all these different rooms inside of rooms around other rooms, couches, cots. It was a large place, a huge fridge that you shared with one another in the middle of this very middle class looking neighborhood. It was amazing to me that they could maintain such a large house. The staff were constantly coming back from and leaving the place. There was a big exit sign on the door along with these, different ways of locking it. You had to sign a form every time you left the house so they would know where you were and when you left in case something happened. It was a very advanced piece of infrastructure, and the system that they had for the workers at this shelter, even though it was a large house, they called it a shelter, was also very advanced. They had a lot of different people who were on the payroll who would drive around and ask you if you needed to go for groceries or needed help in some way, and they were very kind people who worked at this place. Even though my mother had caused a number of arguments with them and seemed to get herself into trouble a number of times, they were pretty kind nonetheless, even though she was clearly wearing thin on their patience, despite all of the goodwill that they seemed to have given to us. So it was a strange time, this arc of, I want to say it was more than a month I had lived there, because it was around September. Yeah, it was around like late-ish September that we end up getting into Maine, and we go through October at that point, through a little bit of November until we go into Nevada, and then finally in late November we got to Kentucky, where I live now. And so the timeline's a little scattered in my head, but as I recall, it was, yeah, no, it was like early October, very late September that we ended up leaving. So we were there for, a bit. We go from, August 21st around to that period. So it was just a bit over a month. But it didn't really feel like we lived there. It was just kind of a place that homeless people, would have went, or abused people would have went. And for a large period of time, we were the only ones there, and that was interesting. At like the beginning, there were two other families who lived there and one woman who was on her own. But eventually, that woman, it was just that woman and us, and that woman kind of kept to herself, or she was out quite a lot. And eventually she left too. So for the majority of time that we were there, it was just us in this huge house. And so what I used to do was I would take my laptop, I would plug an HDMI cable into it that I had gotten from the store, and I would watch anime on this giant TV that they had in the middle of the house, and that was a fun time. And it was how I kind of ignored the depression I was experiencing, because like ever since we got there, I was horribly depressed the whole time, and then dealing with a breakup as well while I was there, that certainly didn't help. But the journey to actually get to Virginia involved, again, all of these arguments and her having to, meet with these shadowy figures at the McDonald's after we got there. And then having to ride on all of these buses, and me just like watching the Cowboy Bebop movie on the bus on my laptop, trying to like have enough room to do that, and watching episodes of Girls Last Tour. Whenever we would have a bus stop, I would try and show my sister Girls Last Tour to give her something to do, and she seemed to have liked the show, which was fun. It was just kind of me trying to find ways to escape on my computer from the whole situation. But the whole situation was really nerve-wracking. Like, there's no two ways about it. I wasn't getting the right sleep. I was just really sad all the time. It didn't feel right being in that place. And eventually, I started taking my mom's diazepam that she had around. And I really wish I did it more, because I would have been less depressed. I only did it like 2 or 3 times because I was scared to do it more, which is retarded. But yeah, I took her diazepam a couple times, and that made the whole situation much easier. I feel like if I did that more often, I wouldn't have been in the amount of gut-wrenching pain that I was in all the time. Like, I can't even describe the level of emotional pain I was in, because, after I had experienced that breakup, it was like my heart was palpitating constantly. I couldn't properly sleep. I needed to be in calls with people just to be able to get to sleep, and then it would only be for a couple hours. I was just irritable 24/7. I was always angry. I was crying all the time. I would like slam my feet into things, just like over and over and over again until my foot was bleeding. I would walk outside, without signing out, without signing anything, and steal the alcohol that was in the fridge that belonged to the woman that had lived there. I would just steal it, and then I would just go into the middle of the park, the public park that they had there, and I'd walk down with a bottle of wine, just drinking the bottle of wine in the middle of the park, which is illegal, and was especially illegal at the age I was at, because I was under the legal drinking age. I was 16. But, I was just so depressed. I'd take like 2 diazepam tablets, because at this point, I had figured out that I could do that. I had found out what that was and that she had it. And I'd just be sitting there drinking wine on the swing set or walking around the park. And those are some of the best memories that I have there, because I was just very calm and I felt okay. But before that point, I was just like so emotionally withdrawn and like distraught that I didn't want to talk to anyone. But on the inside, it was like bombs were going off on the inside of my heart area. And so the whole situation was just me constantly being sad in this really big house. And I wasn't familiar with the town that we were in. I wasn't familiar with any of the people we were around, obviously. It was all a very shocking experience to go from being forcibly removed, essentially, from my house in Tennessee that I had lived at for 16 years, in between on and off going to live at my grandparents' old place, their old trailer, also in Tennessee, not very far away. Those being the only 2 places that I had ever lived at for any consistent period of time, the fact that I had to go to this, horrible trailer in Oklahoma, and then this random, shelter in the middle of Virginia, that's like, if you look at a map, that's just going in a circle at that point. But not a fun circle. It's certainly not an experience I was prepared for with how limited I had, how limited my experience with different states were at that point, living in the same place for as long as I did. Not even living in a city, like I lived, when I went outside in my old home, there were just nothing but trees everywhere. There were nothing but trees everywhere at my grandparents' place too, but at least there were like a couple houses that were around you when you went outside that you could see. Place where I lived, it was just, big acre of land. So it was a jarring transition. And when I experienced that breakup too, living in that place, it was like everything just compounded onto one another. And I was ready for suicide. I'm surprised I didn't take my own life. I came very close. I didn't do anything. I didn't make an attempt at this time, but I ended up going to the hospital, to the emergency room, because I was going to commit suicide. And that was on the day of the breakup that had happened. And it was funny, I had this thought of, I want to go to Vietnam. And I said, I'm not going to kill myself because I want to visit Vietnam and I want to live there for some time, and I'm going to hang out, and public drinking is going to be legal, so I can do that. And I just had that one thought showed up in my brain as I was experiencing this horrible, gut-wrenching, emotional turmoil and stress. I was like, I'm gonna go to Vietnam one day. I wanna see the rain. I wanna see the babes, the dames, going down on the bicycles. You got the bicycles going around. I want to go on the bicycle. And I ended up getting a therapist. I ended up going to outpatient therapy after this time. Like a day or two later, I started going to outpatient therapy for, I think it was called Crisis, is what they called it, for, people who want to kill themselves. And the best therapist I ever had was at that clinic, and you will probably hear about her soon. Yeah, basically Virginia was bad.